Welcome to Helping Organisations Thrive. Today, I have the pleasure of Laura Siddall on the show. So, good afternoon, good morning to you, Laura.
Yeah, good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, isn't it? It's morning for me, but yeah, I think you're in the later afternoon in the UK.
Yes, you're all the way in Hawaii at the moment, which is never been, but I'm sure it's a lovely part of the world.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny. I associate Hawaii. We have a big race, the World Championships, in October every year in Hawaii. So for me, it has different connotations and associations than I think probably what most people would think when you say Hawaii. Having said that, obviously, I'm not complaining. I'm in Hawaii. It's very beautiful. I'm here to help a friend for a different event coming up. But yeah, no complaints from that as I'm sat at, and we were just saying, turning the air conditioning off rather than the heating on, as the UK is at the moment in November.
Absolutely. So I'm just going to introduce you to the audience. You are a professional triathlete, hence your reference there to the Ironman Championships in Hawaii. But you made the jump to become a professional sportswoman in your early 30s. Prior to that, you were an engineer. You spent some time as a British Army's officer. And since your adventure into triathlon, you've won 5 times Iron Distance Triathlon Championships and 4 World Championships as an amateur as well. So you've done pretty good since you've been doing all this. And we're going to be exploring how to take that leap of faith into something very new or a new adventure, and whether that's in a career context, could be, or could be in your business. It could be very relatable here, and how you overcome whether it's naysayers, how you challenge the norm, and how you navigated that with the internal and external sort of pressures that come with that. But before we get there, Laura, what do you love about what you do?
I think probably the people and the community, and I have been lucky that through the sport and through being able to follow what was my hobby and passion, that to make that as a career, I've been fortunate enough to live and travel to amazing places around the world, both training and racing, and you get to meet an incredible array of people and learn their stories and what drives them and their backgrounds. And ultimately then on race day, we're all on the same course at the same time. And I think so I love that aspect, and the fact that yes, it's an individual sport. It's me on the start line getting from A to B as quick as I can. It's me against my other competitors, but there is also that team element around it. Like I said, the community of everyone else, but then also my team, my coach, strength and conditioning coach, nutritionist, massage, everyone else, all those other elements that go into it. So, and I have a team background as well in sport, so I do very much value that. So yeah, I'd say people community is probably what I do love. I mean, then I do love pushing myself, swim, bike, run. It's that combination and balance of seeing where you can improve, seeing how you can be better in each of those disciplines, and then trying to balance that performance on race day to get them all firing at the same time, which is quite a conundrum at times.
Yes, that's the secret sauce, as they call it, isn't it? And it must
That's
happen
right.
different at every race. How
Yeah.
you sort of synchronize all that. And it's interesting to talk about community, isn't it? I think a lot of sports people, whether you're an individual sport or a team sport, the community piece is really important. And who's behind you, supporting you and helping you and aiding you is so valuable. And I think we've got to, completely acknowledge that, communities are really important, and building communities in organizations are equally the same as well. So it's important to do that. So you made this transition from an amateur sort of triathlete to a professional, which is, I say, not too unusual in the sense of people go from amateur to professional. But the challenge you had, and it's not disrespecting your age, you did it in your early 30s, which is a little late, I would say, in the world of triathlon. Firstly, why did you do that, and what were the core reasons behind sort of pushing to go sort of professional?
Yeah, I'd always done sport growing up, so, but it was always the hobby. So, you know, at school, the path was very much go through school, get your A levels, go to university, get a job. And if you did sport or you did extracurriculum activities, I should say, you know, it was great for looking on your for your CV and for an employer to say, oh, like, we've got a great rounded individual and they've got all these other skills that they bring to the workplace as well. So sport was always a huge hobby of mine and I loved it, but and did everything, but never saw it as a profession because of kind of that stereotypical route. I do think that's changed. I will say, and the age thing is reflective here. I do think that's changed a little bit in the UK, but I was probably a few years just ahead of when they came in with all the talent ID programs and sort of when they sort of had got the Olympic bid and they were sort of looking for those, developing the pathway programs, I think, for sport. And I was just a bit too old and a bit ahead of that. So I got the opportunity, so always doing sport, but always as a hobby. I got the opportunity to go to Australia with my job at the time. So as I said, I was an engineer, and through friends from work, got introduced to triathlon and started it as a complete beginner at this point, at the age of sort of 29. And I think just Australia, again, at that point, were just a few more years ahead of the UK in terms of the acceptance of sport as a career and that you could make it as a profession. And it was through those early years as an age grouper, and I got better as an amateur, as an age group, and said sort of lucky to win 4 world championships, that I then sort of started getting that question of, oh, you should do this professionally. And, you know, why don't you do this professionally? And it was quite tricky at first because I still, again, had sort of those connotations around, well, you know, can you do it professionally? It's still a hobby. But also I got to that point of thinking, well, I've always loved sport. It's always been that passion and thing that drives me, but I've never fully committed to seeing what I could do. And here there was then in Australia this opportunity that maybe I could give it a go and I could give it a chance. And, you know, I think I probably got to that turning point. I wasn't particularly enjoying my corporate job at the time. And as you said, I wasn't getting any younger, and it was kind of like a now or never situation. And it was sort of, I don't want to look back 10 or 20 years time and think, what if? And I never gave it this chance. So, yeah, I mean, I then took the leap to become professional at, like you said, the age 34, when most professionals are probably going back to the corporate world or a normal and what we would stereotypically call a normal job, and I was going the other direction. I think there is sort of I also do the endurance side of the sport of triathlon, so that we're racing over 8, 9, 10 hours, and I do think, you know, for that side of it, age can be beneficial. Like, you build up more endurance as you get older. There's no way that I would have been able to be a professional triathlete and be competing at the short distance and at the Olympic distance.
I mean, what obstacles did you face in your own mind when you were making that decision to go, and you call it take a leap, and that's that leaping into something unknown or leaping off a cliff or something? So what were those obstacles and how did you sort of navigate them in your heads?
Yeah, I think at the time there was just that sort of, I guess, should I do this? Could I do this? You know, I think the remarks from family were sort of, you know, but the company you work for, it has a good pension scheme, sort of thing. You know, how are you gonna survive from that side of it? I did a bit of a, I guess, you know, back of the envelope finance. Could I afford to do it, or what did that look like? I think. But didn't really also do a financial look, because I think if I had done it in any detail, I probably wouldn't have taken that leap, because you easily talk yourself out of it. And it was just almost like effort moment to some extreme of going, like I said, if I don't do this now, I'll still be sat here in a corporate environment in years to come. I think the real challenges came afterwards and after I'd made that transition. I ended up moving to the USA because I joined a coach who was based in San Francisco. So I pretty much sort of sold up everything I owned in Australia and, moved my life again to another side of the world, which again, I'd done from UK to Australia. So that wasn't necessarily difficult. Although I would say the difficulty was going from when I moved from the UK to Australia, I had a corporate job. I had sport as a hobby. I did also have some family in Australia. So I had sort of three network, circles, communities, I guess, that I could fall back on. When I moved to the States, the hobby and the job were now one. So that was only one network or community. And also I didn't have family or friends out there as such. So it was suddenly very much a smaller, narrower, community or environment to fit into. And then the other difficulties and challenges were sort of, once I got there, where is that next bit of money coming from? Can I do this? Can I be successful at races to make this sustainable? And it's those questions that were going around in your head, and I ended up searching for those answers and searching for that justification all the time in everything I was doing, and almost getting too caught up as well in what other people would think. Who does she think she is, leaving the corporate world, traveling over the world? Does she think she's going to be the best? Does she think she can be this professional? And so the difficulties I found came after the leap, because I didn't sort of semi-purposely didn't give them too much headspace or time before I made the leap.
So how did you deal with those naysayers or those moments when you're thinking, how am I going to pay for my rent and all the financial realities of this?
Yeah, I mean, the naysayer one is interesting because ultimately that's just what we create in our heads. No one really, everyone is so obsessed with their own lives and their own journeys and what they're doing that no one really, it's hard and it's easier said than done. But no one's really saying that. That's just our perception of what people are thinking and our probably insecurities around that. But on the flip side of that, you have to come back to like, what was that driving force of why you wanted to do it to start with. So for me, it wasn't for the money. Like I wouldn't recommend going into professional sport or not triathlon for a career change of financial security. It was very much a personal drive of, I want to see if I fully commit to something and fully commit to sport, which I hadn't done. Like, how good can I be? How good can I get? What are my limits? What's the best I can be? So that was the driver. And so when you're trying to, shut out those negatives or shut out those voices and those opinions, it's really coming back to that. Remember, I want to see how good I can be. I want to see what I can do in the sport for me. The financial thing was and is still stressful. Even like one of my, pretty much 8-9 years as a professional, and this year, November this time is always sort of contract negotiations and that sort of thing. And I've had a pretty good year of results, but it's probably one of the stressed I've been with trying to look at sustaining this into next year and onwards than I have been for a long time. But I think in those first few years as a professional, it's you don't have the results, you don't have anything to put behind yourself when you are looking at how to make it financially viable. You don't know if you're going to be placing in races and winning money, and it's only very, it's small scale. So and also San Francisco is not a great choice of location. Thanks for the coach at the time, for somebody who's suddenly gone from a corporate salary to no salary, because it's incredibly expensive place to live. So I mean, I was very lucky the first sort of 3-4 months I was staying with a friend. So very generous of them. And then, churned through a lot of savings. So I was lucky I did have savings, but churned through a lot of them in those early days before starting to get a bit more established in terms of a few race results on the cards, and then building up some partnerships and things like that.
You talked about how when it was difficult and it was tough, you went back to almost the reason why you did it. And some would say that's like when people discover their purpose, whether that's in an individual perspective or from an organizational point of view. And when you face challenges, which we always will along the way, we just realign ourselves with the purpose, which almost takes us beyond the moment we're in, and it helps us navigate difficulties, it helps us be more creative. And it's almost like I don't know, your true north or your guiding light, whatever it is. Would you say that's what you got when you made that leap? Is that the sense of purpose about what you were going to try and do? Would you encapsulate it in that context, or would it be something different?
Yeah, I think so. I think, as I said, from a kid, growing up as a kid, sport had always been that thing that really got me excited. I just loved it. I just undid everything. And so now it was excited about having that opportunity to follow that passion and really try and, as I said, see what I could do if I fully committed to something. I think there'd always been a slight fear factor, and I think there still is with me and with a lot of people, in terms of it's that fear of failure. And so you don't really want to fully commit to something in case it doesn't work, and you don't want that kind of shame. But you have to, a lot of times you have to rephrase that. And there's a classic phrase that's, but what if I fail? But what if I fly? And I kind of had that hole as well in taking that leap. I was like, look, what's the worst that can happen? If it doesn't work and I'm not very good at this, or I don't see the improvements, or I don't enjoy it, or financially things run dry, I go back to mum and dad's. I return to the UK. I live with my mum and dad for a bit. I reset. I, go back to the corporate world. There'll be another door that opens. But it was that not living with a regret of never having tried. And never just having seen what that opportunity might give. And with that, like you said, and I think it's that I just wanted to see if I fully committed what I could do and how good could I be at this sport, because I'd never given that. And I think maybe it also comes back, as I said, I was a few years older when all the talent ID programs came in, and I would have loved, I don't have many regrets in life. I've been very fortunate, I know, and but I do wonder, and as a little girl, I would never have dreamt I would be chatting to you from Hawaii and traveling around the world and racing as a professional athlete. But I often wonder if I'd been a few years younger and had been able to go to one of these talent ID programs, what sport I would have ended up in and where I would be. I don't believe I'm particularly talented as such, but I believe I have a physical capacity for sport. And I'd have been fascinated to do a talent ID program at a younger age, and just to get someone else to sort of say, actually, your physiology, you would be great here, and then and see that. But because I never had that, and then so that's kind of that corporate career, and so then making that leap was that well, let's drive that myself. How good can I be if I fully commit here? If that makes sense.
That makes sense. I would say you are pretty talented from my perspective anyway. In terms of, it seems that you obviously had this, whatever it was, untapped potential you thought you had in terms of in a sport context, and you wanted to unleash it, unlock it, how you want to expand it, reach that potential in some capacity that was probably driving you. Just going back a slight tangent on into failure, because you talked about that sort of fear of failure. Can you give me an example where, since you've been professional, that you failed, and how you sort of dealt with that, and did that make you sort of stronger or think differently about going forward?
I think we fail. I don't know whether the word fail. In sport, there is only one winner, effectively, as in the first person that crosses the line. So ultimately, you could say anyone else who doesn't win loses, fails, or whatever. But that's not necessarily the case, because I think we only fail if we don't learn from something. I think failure is an opportunity to learn and improve and be better. So having said that, I would say, though, there are performances. So a couple of things, and if I forget, tell me to come back to the performances. There are decisions I've made in my career which I wish I'd have made a year or so earlier. Again, and it's a little bit about taking a risk, but it's a little bit about the fear of the what if it doesn't work. So a couple of years ago, I realized that I think I needed to change coach, and we'd had a great time together, but it was kind of running its course and coming to its end, and things weren't great. But I was also, at that point, I was late 30s. So again, stereotypically over that age of when people, coming up to people think you should be retiring from sport. And it was kind of like, is it worth changing coach now? How long have I got left? A new coach, you're going to have to go through everything again. Like, is it going to be, is it grass is greener or not? Mm-hmm. And I failed, and there was a fear factor there to make that leap sooner. And I, again, don't have many regrets, but I wish I'd changed to my new coach sooner. And that, again, it's nothing.
So you say was it fear stopping you? Is that what stopped you?
Yeah, I think it was kind of that unknown of what if, and building a new relationship with someone, and is actually what you have, is that the best, or is that, is the grass greener, is it not? But again, it's like you don't know until you try. And actually, it, as I said, it turned out it's that initial fear and failure to make that decision. Now I've done it, has been one of the best decisions I've made in my career, but I kind of should have done it a couple of years earlier.
And so what made you make the decision in the end then? What was something external?
I think you just get to, again, a little bit like that, making the leap to the sport. You can drag it out and you can reason why you shouldn't do it for so long. But at some point, there's like a breaking point or a tipping point where you just need to make that change. And I can't necessarily pinpoint a process you go through, but it's almost like you just hit the bottom, and it's it just, something snaps and you go, I've just got to do. Again, it's like an effort moment. It's like you've just got to go do this. I think then, in terms of, there's been races where I have felt like I failed. And a good example of this was Challenge Roth last year, which is it's a race in Germany. It's a huge race. It's one of my favorite races. I do it every year. It has an amazing team. The people there are they're like family now. I've been there for 6 years, I think. I had a great race in the year before, and I came second, and came in this year just again wanting to have a great day out because it's a race that I love, and you just want to have a good day in that environment. And I came fourth, and I was absolutely gutted and distraught. And now with the caliber of women racing, it was unlikely that I was going to win, and I was aware of that. So I had context or reality, I guess, on what I could achieve on the day. But I feel sort of another second again was achievable. But just I was at the time, I just saw the results and was like, it was distraught. It was a failure. And again, I appreciate this is all relative. It's sport. It's not life and death at the end of the day. And it took me a long time to rationalize and get over that result. And ultimately, I had to sit down. I sat down with my coach. You always give yourself a few days because it's an emotional and mental and physical toll to do these races because they're nine hours, and the training that's gone into it. So you have to give yourself a few days to just let things settle and process. But I was super angry, frustrated, felt I'd, let myself down and others down. It really wasn't the result, but it took like sitting down and talking with my coach and actually just going through it. And actually my performance was actually pretty good, like relatively for the build up I'd had and everything like that. Yes, compared to the result wasn't what I wanted, but the actual physical performance wasn't disastrous as I had felt in that irrational moment. And yeah, I got beaten by people who were better on the day, and I have no control over that. And that is something that you have to accept and learn to manage. But my actual physical performance in the race for me was not as bad as I'd assigned it from the result. And I saw that as a failure, but ultimately had to turn it around and go, yeah, it wasn't the result I wanted, but the performance wasn't disastrous. And there were still lots of things, lots of positives I could take away, and lots of things I could learn from and work on and improve for next time. And then you flip it the other way and you use it then as fire and as motivation and as hunger for then getting better and improving. And so then the next time you step on that start line, you want to have improved on those elements you identified, whatever they may be, in that next performance.
What did you learn about yourself from that experience of coming forth and feeling, in your words, being a failure from your expectations?
I mean, I'm not sure I learned it that way. I'm a very emotional racer when it comes to particularly, like, I kind of, I guess, when I'm racing, wear my heart on my sleeve, or at least afterwards. Again, not sure I learned this. I learned this at the time, but I knew this, and it made it more aware that I'm very critical and very harsh on myself. And again, I think you have to be, I guess the learning from that was you have to be really careful with that. Yeah, that's what makes us all high performers or sports people or people that, in business, super critical because we're wanting to improve. We're always wanting that next, a lot of times we don't often celebrate our successes because we've already switched on to what's next, what's the next goal, how can I be better? And so it's always, almost as athletes or business or anyone in life, you constantly feel like it's never enough. You constantly feel like you're not good enough because our mentality has forgotten what we just achieved, win, result, or anything. And we've already gone on to, well, how can I be even better? So I think, you know, again, I'd say with the help of the coach, the learning was around actually taking a step back, trying to take a little bit of that emotion out of it and rationally looking at, okay, what did you actually do? And then compared to the perform, and I'm wary about saying this in terms of comparison to others, because I think we have to be careful at how we do that. Because again, it should all be about how are we being our best self and relative to our previous performances. But, you know, doing a little bit of like, well, this is where you were compared to X, Y, and Z. And actually that's kind of ballpark from previous races, or yes, there was a little bit better, a little bit, you know, to try and just give it a little bit of context. I also learned, I think, that I'm, and again, I think I kind of knew this. Like I said, I'm, you know, wear my heart on my sleeve, and I'm passionate about the sport and the community and the people I race with. So it's like just having that connection and not feeling like you've let people down as well. But again, ultimately, you know, the next day things have moved on, and you know, it's what's the saying? You know, today's newspaper is tomorrow's chip paper, kind of thing.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
It is a good lesson, isn't it? When things do go wrong and are not great, often we are our worst own critic, and we're harder on ourselves than we are on others. Because some of the stuff that was probably in your head, you won't be like that to the lady who came fifth at all. In fact, you'd be completely the opposite. And I think it's a lesson of being more self-compassionate, really, isn't it? And starting to be a bit more kind on ourselves. I know you've got to push, and I appreciate that and that drive, but actually that can get in the way, can it, sometimes?
Totally, and it totally goes back to all those things. And I am the worst person at this, because I'll say it and I understand it, but then in my head I argue and rationalize differently. You know, that whole, would you say that to your best friend? Is that how you would treat your best friend in terms of everything that you are saying in your head, and the self-sabotage and the you know, the tearing yourself apart? Like you said, I wouldn't say that to the person who came fifth. Would you say that to your best friend? No. So why are you saying it? You know, that's not how you would treat anyone else. So why are you treating yourself like that? And I think that's so true in a lot of situations, but easier said than done, because you always can rationalize, or you always argue, oh, but it's different for me, or it's different when I'm talking to myself. And it's not really. We still need to be, give yourself a little bit of slack and be a little bit compassionate about, what you've still achieved, and what you, I think then it's almost, again, like looking back at like how far you've come as well. Where did you start, and then where have you got to? And success, whatever that means to a person, because I think again that has very different connotations. It's never linear. It's always this kind of roller coaster, and up and down, and you do a left tangent and a right turn and 3 steps backwards and more forward. So I think it's important to kind of remember that path as well.
Yeah, I often look at in my own business. I look year on year how I'm performing, rather than comparing to anybody else, or right at the moment. So actually, this time last year I was here, and I use that as a good steer of my progression over a long year, because obviously it can be up and down, as you say. That's interesting. And the other thing I observe from your learning really is that you took a few days out before you sort of did a debrief, and I think it's a good lesson, that in terms of when things do go a little bit wrong in a business, in a context, or in a team, is to take some time away to get the emotions out, because obviously emotions don't always help, and then do a debrief and do some learnings, do some understandings outside almost a bit more the coldness of the event itself. Because I think when you're heightened, if your coach came to you after the straight race, how do you go on? What should we go? You'd be like, no, it just wouldn't be the helpful time at all. So going back to your transition you made, that leap of faith almost. What advice would you give to somebody today who is about to either do a big career change, or they're going to go for a big, or say start a business? I say that's another huge thing. what advice would you give them based on your own experience and learnings?
Ultimately do it. Ultimately take that leap. And again, easy to say once you've done it, and you can look back. But I would say, in terms of preparing to take that leap, build your cheer squad, your community, your network around you. So have those core people in your corner who, and that's not that they are unrealistic supporters in terms of everything is rosy. Like, you have to have a balance of people, I think, in that group to, challenge your decision, challenge your ideas, just to make you think through a little bit. But you have sort of, have people who can give you support in different ways. And ultimately they will be there as you take the leap. And then that those first few steps are going to be rocky, and they're still there with that faith support regardless of what happens. I think that community, that support is really key. I would also say, from a business perspective, and again, it comes into a little bit of community, but try and if you work with like an executive, a coach, a mentor, someone who again can give you an external perspective from things. It's fascinating. Like in sport, we are constantly getting feedback. We have gadgets, data. We have a coach. You are almost like constantly reviewing every session and things like that. And I don't think we do that enough in business in terms of performance. I think you have to, again, I always say you have to be careful not to kind of like get paralysis by analysis as well. And sometimes, it stops doing that. And a little bit going back to what you just said about taking a few days to take the emotion out and then doing a review. And I think I kind of probably learned that from being in the army and the military, and like any operation, you're all constantly doing what went well, what didn't go so well, what can we do better. And I feel with some of my experience now, having a little bit of a foot back in the corporate world, that seems to be missing. And I think the high performing teams and the high performing businesses do it, and the others haven't quite got there yet. But that is, but then for somebody then thinking about taking a leap, I would, go back to what it is why are you doing this? Why do you want to do this? What is that? Why that driver? And building your network and support team around you that will be with you up and down kind of thing, and get you through it, good and bad. They'll be your cheer squad, but they'll be your reality voice as well, kind of thing.
Yeah, that's important. That cheering you along, but also creating that sense of keeping your feet on the ground in the context, and that's something that those people around you. Now, you have this obviously high performance mindset and wanting to excel, and sometimes you're hard on yourself and you push yourself. We've got a question that's coming from somebody I think you went on that podcast. As in, I'll read the question: what role has growing up with three sisters, themselves all high performers, played in your performance? This comes from Paul Teasdale.
I mean, I could say something very rude at this point about my three older. I'm the youngest of four girls. Three of us are engineers, I guess I would say. I think the role of growing up with three sisters, it's shown me, I think we were all brought up to be pretty fiercely independent, and I guess driven in terms of what we could achieve. I think particularly from a sports perspective, one of my sisters played sport at a very high level, playing netball. And I think that was a huge, like, she would go to athletics and training, and then I was a lot younger and would go along with her. And I think that it got me into sport. And then I could see when she was playing sport, it wasn't professionally either. And I could see the hard, she was full-time job and tying that down with then how hard she worked in sport. I think it's almost like, I think when you're young, you probably don't really appreciate it as much. But I think for me, I'm very passionate about women in business, women in sport. So having 3 older sisters, particularly in engineering, and my dad was an engineer, I think that's very powerful to see what, as female, as women, we can achieve. I think probably now, being a lot older, I appreciate what they do and what they have achieved in their own rights even more, because it's so different from what I'm doing, and what they're achieving in business or in their own fields of expertise, I find is fascinating, and would love to sort of have more of these types of conversations with them to learn more from them. But ultimately we don't, because when we get together with a family, there's like kids screaming and running around the place, and it's more just like that and you almost revert back to type of when you were 6, 8, 10 and 12 kind of thing. And I'm the youngest at that point, so I would say I'm the one that gets the piss taken out of me, and my leg pulled probably more than the others. But I think it just showed like what you can achieve, and that we can all be incredible in different, all achieve in different areas. And it was inspiring, I guess, to some extent. Yeah,
that is inspiring. And just finally, really, just one last thing. You've got a quote that says, "Don't die wondering," and I was wondering how you conjured that up, where it's come from, and why you've got that quote, and what it means to you.
Yeah, so that was actually when I was in Australia, and I was doing the sport as an amateur and had my corporate job, and I was heading out to the Ironman 70.3 World Championships, which were held in Las Vegas. This was in 2013. And I guess at this point, I'd been in the sport a few years, and I'd progressed through those amateur ranks. And I was going out, and there were a few kind of like, are you going to turn professional and that sort of thing. I still felt very new and not ready to turn to that full leap. But anyway, I was going out to this event, and a friend who I'd been training with in Australia just sent me a message, and it just said, "Don't die wondering." And I sort of then adopted it from there and took it into the race. And again, I guess it's that, you don't want to look back and think, what if? It's it's that no fear, no regrets, and came out of that race with the win for my age group and overall female amateur. And that was kind of that starting point of going, okay, maybe there is something here. And so then try and I don't always get it right, but try and fall back on, any of those. If I get to a crossroads, a turning point in decision-making process of like, try and fall back on that. Don't die wondering. Like, life is, it's too short. We only have, it's not a dress rehearsal. This is it. We got to make the most of it. We've got to, if we follow that passion, or, lucky, fortunate, I don't know. Do you make your own luck? It's, it's not easy. It's hard work. It's, I was, slight tangent here, I was listening to a podcast on manifesting and that sort of thing, and a lot of people think it is just sort of dreaming up and it'll happen. It's like, no, you have to do the work to get there, but it's just conceptualizing how you're going to do that work, and into that vision at the end of it. And I do a lot of visualization in sport, so I think that's where the phrase came from. And then I try and sort of use that as a bit of a backbone if I do come to anything of, should I do this? Should I move here? Should I move to Boulder from Spain? Should I move to New Zealand at that point, a few years ago, and the risks and stuff? And it's like, come on then, what is that value? Why are you doing it? And, a little bit of that, the what if, don't die wondering, just do it sort of thing. Yeah. It's
almost like a value to you, isn't it, really? It's like a real value that helps drive you and helps you make decisions, big decisions, important ones. I think it's a brilliant one. And Yes, visualization. You can't just sit on a sofa, visualize it, and it'll all happen. You've got to get out and do stuff as well. I'm really
Yeah.
into visualization. I do a lot of stuff with when I coach people. It's visualize. It's really important, but you have to put some action in as well along
Yeah.
the way. I've really enjoyed our conversation, Laura, and thank you for sharing so openly and honestly about how you've made that transition. And there's been some great insights along the way, and really helps for people who are making either career transitions or going to start a business or whatever it may be, a big project in an organization. Really appreciate your time. If people want to connect with you, get in touch with you, what's the best way of doing that?
Yeah, thank you as well. I've really enjoyed chatting, and I'm sure we could go on for like another hour or so, talk about all different concepts. Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn, so I guess from a professional crossover into business, but I do put stuff on. I'm on LinkedIn, easy enough to find, I think, just Laura Siddall. But probably in terms of following, Instagram is a fairly big one for me. So at LMSid, Twitter I'm on at LMSiddall, Facebook and everything else as you. Well, I say as normal, but it's quite old now. I think I haven't yet gone onto TikTok, and I know I should. And then I'm sure I set up a group with some young female athletes a couple of years ago and wanted a platform to all communicate through. And I, of course, said, oh, well, let's do Facebook. But they're all like 16, 17-year-olds and like, yeah, we don't have Facebook. That's what our parents have. And I was like, okay, yes, quite old now. But yes, I am on those platforms.
Excellent. Well, what I'll do, I'll make sure in the show notes we'll have all those sort of connections of Instagram, Twitter, website, and everything else. That'd be good. Yeah, thank you for your time today, Laura. Much appreciated.
No, thanks very much. Thank you.